This episode of the Lunduke Journal is a little bit different. This isn't about breaking news. I wanted to simply relate a story that I thought was a little bit bizarre. Back in September, shortly after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, I was contacted by a tech journalist writing for phosphorus.com, a smaller, open source focused publication, who was working on an article around open source, Antifa, and the Lunduke Journal's coverage of these topics. And just to give you a little taste so you know what we're talking about here, I did a show back in September, on September 10th, entitled Open Source Leftists Celebrate the Murder of Charlie Kirk, where I went through and just showed screenshot after screenshot of big tech employees, open source project leaders and founders and tech journalists, employees of Red Hat, on and on and on, who celebrated the assassination of Charlie Kirk, who posted about how much they loved it, about how it should have been done sooner, about how they really liked that Charlie Kirk was now dead, about how other people should be killed as well. I mean, it was crazy stuff, right? And I noted that many of those people were also very proud of their ties to Antifa, right? They had Antifa flags that they flew. They talk about Antifa a lot. They're really pro Antifa. And so I covered that back in September. Now, the particular outlet that reached out to me was phosphorus.com. They had several months prior to that run an anti-Lunduke hit piece without first reaching out for comment, which interestingly resulted in their most popular article, at least on social media, in quite some time, possibly that I was ever able to find. The hit piece, it was interesting. It was ostensibly about Gnome. It was entitled Gnome's New Director Tackles Funding, Pride, and Prejudice. This was back in June. Interestingly, that Gnome director only was in the job for 4 months and is already out of the job. But most of the article was actually about the Lunduke Journal, about me in general, calling me the Tucker Carlson of Linux and open source, not at all concerned for the people he claims are being hurt. He attacks of gay and trans people. If anyone were to listen to his words and be motivated to threaten or to actually cause harm to gay and trans people, or people of any other groups being targeted, Lunduke would deny responsibility. Whether inspired by Lunduke or not, transphobes, homophobes, racists, and other haters are targeting people at GNOME and making threats against people connected to the project, leaving folks scared and everyone concerned. And it just kind of went on and on and on and on. And the GNOME Foundation loved it because it was talking about their biggest enemy, which is me, apparently. They're one of their board of directors people talked about how great this was. Thank you for sharing it. Blah, 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 blah. So it was this big hit piece, and they didn't reach out to me first. But you know what? That's fine. I'm kind of used to that. So then they did reach out to me for a news story. So with that in mind, it seemed reasonable to me that they wanted to repeat the success they had with that previous anti-Lunduke story, right? They ran one anti-Lunduke story. It did great. I mean, as far as like the social media like view ranking is concerned, I don't think they had any story that had ever performed that well. Now this time, however, they were reaching out to me for a news story, but they were doing the responsible thing. Right? Same journalist, same publication. They reached out to the subject of the hit piece article with questions. They reached out to me with questions. And I like encouraging tech journalists when they do actual journalism, right? Call me crazy. It's a good thing, right? I want to reward good behavior. So I answered each and every question that was asked of me, which were all very politically charged questions, clearly set up to make me look as bad as possible. But I answered each and every one with easy to quote responses. I wanted to make this easy for the other journalists to just copy and paste and quote me and do whatever they wanted to with it, right? Made it real easy for them. But it would appear that the answers that they received were not conducive to creating the hit piece they were hoping for. My guess is, and I'll read this to you in a second, you tell me, but my guess is that they realized that their questions made them and the open source Antifa supporters look like the villain in the story, right? The villain that they were hoping clearly to portray me as, right? They wanted to make a story about how Lunduke is the villain, and I think my answers made me look like the good guy and them look like the villain. They opted to not publish the piece at all for whatever reason, all right? Right? They opted to not get a whole lot of traffic for a reason that is unknown. Wink, wink. So I'm just publishing it for them. All right, this is the hit piece that I assume they would run. So what I've done is I'm providing every single question they asked me. I'm going to read it all to you and every answer with absolutely no edits. No edits of whatsoever. Here's all the questions they asked and here's my answers in full. And these were all asked by me to me on September 19th by a tech journalist by the name of Christine Hall, writing for Phosphorus. Now, a fair warning before we dive into this. This is very politically charged. These questions are super, super political. It does touch on open source stuff here and there, but it was clear that this was meant to be a political hit piece, right? They were attacking me politically. But they didn't want to publish it, so I'm publishing it for them. Enjoy. Here we go. So September 19th, Christine Hall asks, the last time I mentioned you in an article, you castigated me for not reaching out to you beforehand. Well, I'm reaching out now. We'll see what comes of this. You do recognize that the vast majority of organizations using the term Antifa as a descriptor are not in the least bit terrorist and pose no threat to society. And indeed, the only threats they might pose to fascist groups are not physical or life-harming? That's the question. I responded, hello, Christine. Nice to hear from you. Many, if not most of those proclaiming support for Antifa within open source have also made statements encouraging or supporting violence and discrimination. Regardless of that fact, which I have documented extensively in Lunduke Journal coverage, when violent acts are committed, such as murder, riots, and lynchings, in the name of Antifa, to turn around and immediately declare yourself to be Antifa is a clear declaration of support of that violence. Christine Hall asks, and why did you feel it necessary to call out Daniel Forays, the founder of Elementary OS Linux distributions, trans status in such an ugly manner? Now, it should be noted here, one of the person that I quoted is named Daniel Foray. Daniel Foray is the founder of Elementary OS and currently runs the Elementary OS Linux project. And he is a man who considers himself to be a trans woman, right? That's just what he is. Well, he also came out and made some statements following Charlie Kirk's murder that were distasteful, and I mentioned those. Here's my response. Quote, there is a noteworthy overlap between trans activism and support for political violence, including in the recent murder of Charlie Kirk. The murderer's boyfriend was trans. In the case of Daniel Foray, he, a leader of an open source project, regularly calls for discrimination and violence against people he disagrees with, often in conjunction with his self-declaration as trans. Thus, his declaration of being trans becomes a part of the overall story. It is worth noting here that the Lunduke Journal has never and would never call for discrimination or violence against someone because of how they identify or who they may or may not vote for. This is in stark contrast to those such as Mr. Foray who consider themselves trans or Antifa, who actively advocate for both discrimination and violence. Hall then asks the following question. Mentioning a person's trans status in ways that are pertinent to your argument necessitates rudeness, such as calling her a dude who likes to wear dresses? That's the question. Because I did call Daniel Foray a dude who likes to wear dresses. I did. That's a real quote. I responded, Dan Foray is in fact a dude who likes to wear dresses. The only reason to view that as a negative is if you view dudes wearing dresses as a negative, end quote. Okay, so I'm a little snarky. Hall responds. Hall has this following response. I'll quote you on that, which I'm pretty sure won't bother you in the least. I respond, absolutely. Quote anything I say here. In fact, I suggest quoting absolutely everything I've written to you here today. Hall says, you also understand, don't you, that voicing disagreement with an assessment made by the President of the United States of America is not only legal, but a healthy part of the national dialogue. It wasn't even a question. That was just a statement. There's a period at the end. So I respond, absolutely. Did I say somewhere that it was illegal to disagree with a politician? It seems unlikely that I have ever said that. End quote. Then Hall says this. Also, how would you reply to this? There have been very few murders linked to individuals associated with Antifa. Some incidents of rioting attributed to Antifa supporters and no credible evidence of lynchings conducted in the name of Antifa. Compared to far-right groups, violence attributed to Antifa is much less frequent and lethal, with only one suspected kill, Aaron Danielson in Portland, by an anti-fascist activist, officially confirmed in recent U.S. history. So I responded with this. Murder is bad. I am opposed to all murder. In the context of these discussions, bearing in mind the Kirk murder is important, as many statements were made in response to it. The murder of Kirk appears to have been pro-trans and pro-Antifa based on all available information. End quote. Hall then says, is there any evidence that the suspect was part of an Antifa group? I haven't seen any. So I respond. And again, this was on September 19th, right? So just very, very shortly, was it, a little over a week later. I have seen some reporting to this effect, including statements from family and messages he wrote. But far more important to this story is the response to the murder among Antifa supporters, including those within open source. A large portion of Antifa supporters have celebrated the murder as justified because it killed someone they considered to be a, quote, fascist. Hall responded, also, no group should be held responsible for what some deranged person who identifies within the group has done. There's many things I could have said in response to that, but here's what I said. I agree that a broader group should not be held responsible for the actions of a small number of individuals. However, and this is critically important, it is entirely appropriate to hold people responsible for their own statements and actions. With that in mind, the overall messaging of Antifa and Antifa supporters tends heavily towards violence. Punching, killing, Molotov cocktails, etc. are all common messaging used by Antifa, including by those, I quote, within the open source world, many of whom have advocated for violence against myself. Advocating for violence, then celebrating when violence is committed are not good things. Yet we see a great deal of that among open source supporters of Antifa. So there you have it. At that point, there was no more questions. I think my answers were not going to make them look good. I think the journalist in question, I think she would have had to chop up my answers a whole lot and really reorganize the words entirely to make it into something that made me look bad. It was a lot of I'm against murder and I'm against violence. Right? Because that's the viewpoint that I hold, and that's generally the consistent viewpoint of the Lunduke Journal is violence is bad, censorship is bad, attacking people is bad, glorification of violence is bad. Like discrimination is bad. These are all bad things. And a lot of what the Lunduke Journal does is notice when those things are being done, glorification, encouraging of violence, discrimination, and whatnot, within open source, within big tech, within technology foundations, and I point to it and I say, well, this is happening. Screenshot, here it is in context, and this is what they're advocating for. And now here's an opportunity for them. And I provide this opportunity regularly for anyone who says that I'm misrepresenting what they're saying, to provide me a quote, and I will read it in full. If there's a statement to clarify how I got something wrong, send it in to me. I will read it in full. I will do an interview with, if a founder of an open source organization makes a statement in support of Antifa celebrating a murder, and I quote that and I show everyone the screenshot and I say, wow, this is concerning. If I've taken that out of context somehow, come on my show. Let's talk about it. Tell me how I got it wrong. And I provide that opportunity to everyone regularly. And you notice how many people take me up on that. Not too many, pretty much none, almost zero, right? Statistically, it's an asymptotic line heading towards zero. But that's just the way it is. Now, in this particular case, this Phosphorus publication opted to not run forward with this story because it was stupid. It was a stupid story for them to run in the first place. I mean, it basically was a political hit piece against the Lunduke Journal. Well, they're supposed to be a free and open source software tech publication. Now, covering the politics that are occurring within the world of open source and technology in general is an absolutely valid thing to be doing. But this didn't really seem to be about anything other than coming at me politically to discredit me in some particular way. Now, they are well within their rights to do that. If the Phosphorus and many other organizations feel that it is important to discredit the Lunduke Journal, to attack the Lunduke Journal, by all means do it. By all means do it. I do think it is very telling that when they decide to do it and they reach out for comments, with questions for me, and I provide them. And as you can see, not in a combative way, in a kind way, in a polite way, where I provide easy to use quotes, they can't figure out how to turn that into a story that actually makes me look bad. So they ditch it. Instead of running the story and providing that information for their readers, they decide to ditch it entirely. Now, I don't know this for sure. But my gut tells me that if I had provided them with questions that made me look bad, that poorly represented my particular viewpoints or the reporting of the Lunduke Journal or something, they would have run the story. I believe that is most likely the case. Looking at their past reporting that has talked about me a bit, that certainly looks to be the case. If they could have made some big trumped up thing where they're like, oh, he's a fascist Nazi who's being racist and discriminatory against people, which obviously they can't say if they actually quote my responses. And they know that if they misquote me, I'm just going to turn around and publish the full quotes, and then they're going to look bad. So they drop it. They drop it entirely. Which is why I decided to go ahead and publish this myself. Again, thank you for bearing with me on this. This isn't a normal tech news thing. This isn't breaking news. This doesn't change anything, really. I just kind of wanted this out there. I wanted it out there, and I felt like it was worth talking about. Thank you to the Lunduke Journal subscribers, by the way, for making it all possible. Lunduke.com, links. Lunduke.com and links. Click on them. They're great. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, nerds and nerdettes, across the inner tubes, I do declare, end broadcast.